Good evening and welcome, and good morning to those of you joining us from Hong Kong. Thank you all for being here. My name is Mike Babin, and I'm the president of the Hong Kong Veterans Commemorative Association, and I'm proud to be the son of Alfred Babin, a Hong Kong veteran. I'll introduce tonight's topic and our two presenters in a moment, but first I'll get our administrative work out of the way with a very brief reminder about how the session will be conducted. Your camera and microphone are off, so feel free to enjoy a glass of wine. Nobody can see you. You can ask questions at any time using the chat function of Zoom. You may have to tap your screen or move your mouse to make the chat function appear. Just type your questions as you think of them. There's no need to wait until the end of the presentation. We won't be answering your questions right away, but we will get to them when our presenters have finished their talks. And a note, we're recording this event, and the recording will be available on the HKVCA website, www.hkvca.ca. Don't hesitate to recommend that your family and friends watch it. Now, with that out of the way, let's move to tonight's presentation. As a Canadian, I find it's easy to lose sight of the fact that not only were there Canadians defending Hong Kong from the Japanese attack, but there were thousands of other defenders, among others, English, Scottish, and Indian regular troops, as well as many locals who had taken up arms as reservists, for example, in the Hong Kong Volunteer Defense Corps. Where did all of those soldiers fight? Not only that, what fortifications did they use? What armament did they have? And let's not ignore the 50,000 plus Japanese soldiers arrayed against them. The 17-day battle was a chessboard of men, equipment, and movement from the mainland to throughout the island of Hong Kong, and its exceedingly difficult terrain. Written descriptions of the battle in the many books available can stimulate vivid pictures in one's mind, but getting an overall grasp of all the chess pieces in motion is very difficult. This evening, our speakers will describe and show you how spatial mapping technology is helping to overcome this challenge. We'll first take a look at the overall situation, including all combatants, and then zero in on the Canadian involvement. Now, tonight's speakers are Dr. Kwong Chi Man and Nathan Kaler. Dr. Kwong Chi Man is an associate professor in the history department of Hong Kong Baptist University. He specializes in the military and naval history of modern East Asia, particularly from the Sino-Japanese War of 1894 to 95 to the 1970s. He has published Eastern Fortress, a military history of Hong Kong, 1840 to 1970, and just last year, Hong Kongers in the British Armed Forces, 1860 to 1997. Chi Man's works can also be found in peer-reviewed academic journals, including Modern Asian Studies, War in History, and the Journal of Military History. Nathan Kaler is the executive director of the Canadian Research and Mapping Association and one of the creators of the interactive web map, Project 44, The Road to Liberation, which he will tell you about this evening. A veteran of the Canadian Forces, Nathan has served in both Afghanistan and Latvia. His expertise is in mapping the Second World War and creating digital exhibits. So we'll start off with Dr. Kwong. Chi Man, please go ahead.
Thanks, Mike, for the excellent sum up of my work, and welcome to today's presentation. So this is 8:37 in Hong Kong time in the morning. So what I'm going to do is to share my PowerPoint about my presentation of our spatial history project. So basically, it was about the Battle of Hong Kong, and I'm going to give a very brief introduction of my presentation and then talk about spatial history as a concept, and then I will have a very brief introduction of our project. So my presentation would last around 25 minutes or so. So I'm going to basically give a very short account of what we have done. That is an interactive web map about the Battle of Hong Kong, only the 17.5 or 18 days of the battle, through the use of GIS, and how we try to recreate not only the battle itself, the movement of troops, but also the attempt to find all the related historical military structures that are still exist in Hong Kong, and those also are demolished. And we also try to highlight the use of this project in terms of the conservation of built heritage, knowledge transfer, and so on and so on. So spatial history. So in the past 20 or so years, we historians try to use more and more GIS in our research. Of course, we still produce text-based product deliverables, such as books, journal articles, etc., but we also increasingly use GIS and other IT tools to help with our research, and sometimes we use it for exhibiting or showing our research or visualizing our research, because they are a lot more easy to use compared with like 1 or 2 decades ago. So 20 years ago, you don't really have a very easy to use GIS tools such as like Google Map or ArcGIS and so on. And now they are available. And even those who do not really have the knowledge of code language or computer language can really use it, such as me. I can't do coding. I don't really have much knowledge in computer science, but I'm an academically trained historian. But even that, we can still use GIS to really help with our research. So spatial history, we don't really have a very concrete definition of it. But when we talk about spatial history, this is basically the idea. We focus on the movement of things like human beings, goods, etc., through space and over time. The scale of our work varies. Some spatial historians focus on tiny spaces like even a home, a flat, or a dwelling. But some people can focus on movement of things across continents, migration, economic development, or movement of ideas, etc., over different periods of time. Some spatial history projects focus on a time span of like hundreds of years or even longer. But in my project, we focus on what happened in 17.5 days or 18 days. So scale is not really a problem, but the biggest issue is that the location is the main character of our story. So it's not just a background that we just describe it and then we go on. No, the location itself is very important, and we focus on the movements that will give the place a meaning. So basically that's that. So in our case, it's very straightforward in our case, because it's about the battle that changed the lives of so many people, the battle that changed the course of history to different degrees for different parties. For example, for Hong Kong, it's actually quite important, but less so for other places maybe. So and the war is still being commemorated nowadays. So definitely it is meaningful. So that's why we try to use this approach to sort of reapproach the Battle of Hong Kong. There has been many books about the Battle of Hong Kong. I myself wrote 3 Chinese and 1 English book about this, 2 English book about this. But after doing this with the use of GIS, I myself must admit that I have some new understanding of the battle as well. So GIS, Geographical Information System, it's not just maps. It's basically a spatially referenced database. And for us historians, the most important part is the inclusion of a time temporal dimension in this database, so that we can really show the movement of things. We can really show the flow of the battle. We can show the progress of things and so on. So the changing experience of different parties and different people. So that's the key thing that we would like to capture. And of course, with a spatially referenced database, we can also analyze the battle again with a more clear picture, and we can really have some insights that is almost impossible to get from a text-based narrative or from static maps, really. In fact, static maps are good, but sometimes they really can't do the job. So our goal is very straightforward. At the beginning, when we apply for funding from the Quality Education Fund, that is part of the Hong Kong Education Bureau. So we sort of tell them that we want to create an interactive map that is easy to see for the students and the teachers, so that when they teach the Battle of Hong Kong in the classroom, They do not have to check very complex military maps, etc., etc. They can just look at the screen, see the movement of troops, and then that's it. So basically, it was an interactive map about the Battle of Hong Kong, and also an online database about all these related historical structures like pillboxes, observation posts, gun batteries, etc., etc. And of course, when we progressed, we started to feel that we were pretty naive at the beginning, because I just wanted to create an interactive map. But then we started to feel the need to include information from many different aspects of the battle. For example, the military structures, the people's stories, and at the end of the day, we even included databases about different units, the equipment both sides used, and a long database of the locals who participated in the battle. The name list is growing. We try to locate each and every one who participated, the locals who participated in the battle, their rank, their units, etc., etc. So right before we actually start our work, we asked ourselves why we are doing this, because, well, being the first who do the GIS about Battle of Hong Kong is not really a reason for us to do that. So we really want to turn this into something useful. So, for example, it should be a research tool. It helps people with their research and helps people with their different projects. And as a military historian, I have to confess that when we write military history, especially when we focus on what happened at the front, we usually overlook what happens behind. For example, the experience of the civilians, women, or even children, etc., etc. They are usually ignored in text-based narratives, especially those about the military side of things. So we want to include that experience in the spatial project as well, because that's a very good tool for us to show everything on the map. And of course, we should also help with education, conservation, and at the end of the day, we can help change how people see historical events, learn about historical events from a spatial perspective. So that's that's the basic introduction of our project. So we spent some time on the user interface, because it's something new, really. It's not a book. It's no longer a book. It's an interactive map with some text to talk about what happened at a particular time, but the main character are those in the middle, the moving units and so on. You can zoom in, zoom out of the map. You have a timeline talking about, at the bottom, talking about different period of time, the progress of time. You have a map menu on the left-hand side talking about allowing the viewers to select different layers of information from units to historical structures to other additional layers. And then you have an event box talking about the progress of events and so on, and then other info box. We will show the map later on. So it was actually quite an experience trying to design the user experience and user interface, because we know very little about this. And of course, we learned a lot from Nathan's project, Project 44, because Nathan was actually one of the foremost guy in creating work maps about military history, especially for the Second World War. So at the very beginning, when we know nothing, Nathan helped a lot. So we included 3 historical map layers, 1 British and 2 Japanese. And from the Japanese maps, you can see how much the Japanese know before they attacked Hong Kong, how much they knew before they attacked Hong Kong. So that's very important information, and we can do some immediate comparisons when we put everything on a GIS. And the historical structures, if you have visited Hong Kong or if you are into hiking, you probably know that many of the historical military structures still exist in Hong Kong, and you can actually go up the hill and find them. In fact, I live in the eastern part of Kowloon. When I go hiking, in less than an hour, I would reach Mount Devil's Peak batteries. 2 huge gun batteries were right next to my home, basically. I just walk up the hill and I can see them in less than an hour. So let me use an example. Just 1 British pillbox. So it appears on the Japanese map, and then we will try to find its exact locations from other maps, for example, in this British one, and then we check the aerial photographs in after the Second World War. This one is in 1960s, and we try to locate it with some confidence, and then we go up the hill, trying to find it. Sometimes they were there, sometimes they were gone. So in this case, it still exists, but the top was blown away because in the 50s, the British decided to demolish all these pillboxes, but they did not remove the debris. So that's it. The ruins were still there. And then we placed all these, what we call points of interest on the map. So now we have the location of this PB 106. And interestingly, after we place it on a map, we compare it with the Japanese map that they used when they attacked Hong Kong. Now, interesting things happen because we can really compare with what the Japanese knew or expected with what actually were there. And you can see some really striking results. They knew there was a pillbox, and they marked additional positions nearby. So those were field positions, trenches, machine gun positions, etc., etc. So, but some pillboxes were missed. So Japanese knew something, they didn't know others. There's a very interesting observation there. And as for the units, we of course consulted all these war diaries from both sides. So the Japanese had their own war diaries, the British had their own war diaries, the Canadians, Indians, etc., etc. So they were of different degree of accuracy or detail, because in some units the officers were all killed. So you have a very sketchy account of things. In some cases, for example, for the Middlesex or for the 2 Canadian battalions, the war diaries were fairly accurate and detailed, so that we can really pinpoint to different degrees. So for example, in some units, we can show the position of platoons, but for some units, we can't really. We can just show the general location of a company. But for example, for the artillery units, we can really pretty accurately show the position of them, because in the defense scheme, in the defense plan of the garrison, they actually have all these map coordinates written. So we can pinpoint their location down to individual guns or individual battery sections, gun sections. So for example, in this case, we can use the map coordinate to pinpoint where these guns were. So we can locate 2 6-inch guns actually along the Taiwan Gap, and we can place it on it. And for the Japanese map, the case was similar, but not exactly the same, because they don't really have that detailed description, but they have very detailed maps. So in our case, we also consulted these maps. And one thing about the Japanese map is that they included a time right next to the position, which is extremely useful for us. So we can just follow the time, place their units, and compare with the Japanese and the British accounts, and generally place all these units on the map. And sometimes in the Japanese regimental histories and post-war memoirs, they go to the detail to platoon or even section levels. So it's very useful. But there's so many Japanese units, so we sort of abstracted some of them. So that's how we locate the military units. And as I said, spatial history is, of course, about time, because we're doing history after all. So we sort of divided the battle of 17.5 days into 50 time steps. So each time step represents a static point of the time. But we did not create all these time steps equally in equal intervals. So some time steps would be further apart from the previous one. The reason is that because during the Battle of Hong Kong consists of several stages. In some stages, you don't really have unit movement. For example, between the Japanese conquer of Kowloon to the Japanese landing of Hong Kong Island, there was like 4 or 5 days of inactivities on both sides. Both sides artillery unit just shelled at each other, but no units moved. So we sort of compressed that period. And then on the Battle of Hong Kong, for the Battle of Hong Kong Island, we sort of give more detailed description in our map. So we have 50 time steps. People can actually check the position of different units at different time. So another thing that is very important for me is the human dimension. As this picture was taken during the Victory Parade in 1946, and this is the Hong Kong representative. Okay, this is the Hong Kong contingent. You can see different faces: Chinese, Portuguese, Eurasian, Indians, British, of course, and so on and so on, and lots of different ethnicity, cultural background, social background, etc., etc. It's a very Hong Kong story. It's a very Hong Kong picture in a case, and we try to showcase this in our project. This is a very important dimension, and as I said, as a military historian, I always find my work lacking in the portrayal of the diverse experience of the people. So nowadays, people may find it natural that in accounts, you always, in movies, for example, you always, even in war movies, you always have a female character, a colored character, and so on. So I think it's very important because in our map, if we just focus on the experience of the soldiers, it's not very realistic because the city consists of 1.5 million inhabitants of different gender, ethnicity, orientation, etc., etc. So we try to capture that in our map as well. So we included the stories of different people and placed them on the map where things happened to them. For example, where they were captured, whether they were killed, whether they were wounded, etc., whether they simply went through the battle. So we place all this experience on the map as well. And of course, you also have lots of pictures taken before, during, or immediately after the battle. And we also try to pinpoint where these pictures were taken. I'll give you one example. For example, this was taken, I think, on 17th of November, 1941, when the Canadian reinforcements have arrived. So when C-Force arrived, they landed in Hot's Wharf, so on the Kowloon side, and they marched along Nathan Road all the way to Sham Shui Po. So this picture was taken right before Peninsula Hotel, when they marched past the GOC Major General Christopher Motley, and that's exactly where they marched past and then moved along Nathan Road. So we included all these pictures as well on the map, and then we placed them on the map so that people can click on it and see all these pictures and know where they were taken. So it really helps with the general public, how they approach the battle from different perspectives. And I think it's very important because nowadays, as a teacher myself, I taught in a university for 12 years, 13 years. And my experience is that you really can't expect everyone to read a 300 pages book for a historical event nowadays. So people are busy. It's just things in the modern times. You can't really ask everyone to read. If they want to know about the Battle of Hong Kong, you can't just go tell them read a book of 300 pages or so. So this is that's why I try to do this interactive map, also not just as an academic exercise, but also as a public outreach or knowledge transfer tool, as an invitation for people who are more busy or less time, can spend less time on this, to try to know something about the battle, possibly as the beginning of a larger quest for more about the battle. So it's more like an invitation. So what's next? After we finished a map, this 2D interactive map about the Battle of Hong Kong, so we moved on to create we're trying to create an interactive map, this time in 3D, about the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong. So it consists of lots of details about what happened in Hong Kong when the Japanese occupied the city from December 1941 all the way to August 1945. So we included where the Japanese occupied, what buildings they used, what campuses they garrisoned, etc., the piers they used, the things that they confiscated, and of course the prisoners of war experience, and so on and so on. So that's why on this map you can see in Sham Shui Po you have a small icon on it. So it's the POW camp, of course, and also there were Allied resistance on the spot. So we try to create this map, and I hope we can finish it in, I don't know, within 2014. Yeah, and then by that time, I maybe Mike will ask me again to give it another short presentation to introduce this project to you. Thank you very much, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chi Man. It's an amazing system that you have there, and obviously a lot of work has been invested in it. And for those who would like to actually try it out themselves, you will be receiving a link tomorrow, which will enable you to try the system out. And I encourage you to do that. Now, Nathan, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, so Nathan Kaler, let's hear about Project 44 and the fall of Hong Kong.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the introduction and great presentation by Dr. Kwong. Very happy to be here tonight and talk about Project 44 and our Forgotten Fronts project, which includes the Battle of Hong Kong. So just briefly talk about some of the team that worked on the Battle of Hong Kong. Myself, the executive director of the CRMA, I was heavily involved with the mapping and web development of the Battle of Hong Kong. My colleague, Drew Hannon, who's the vice president of our association, he worked on the research and war diaries for the Battle of Hong Kong. And then we had the excellent Dr. Brad St. Croix, good friend of our project. He's a historian who specializes in Hong Kong, and he did a lot of the writing for our project.
Nathan, we're losing your audio a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me fine?
Oh,
now?
that's better. That's better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, just let me know if it goes. I've been having some problems, so hopefully it's not an issue. So briefly, I just want to talk about what is Project 44 and the Canadian Research and Mapping Association. We are a Canadian not-for-profit based in Ottawa since 2018. For the last 4 years, our team has been working with organizations like Veterans Affairs Canada and Library and Archives Canada to make Canadian history accessible. Over the years, our team has worked with some of Canada's key historical and educational organizations, including the Juno Beach Centre and Defining Moments Canada. So you can actually see over here a picture of our team with historian David O'Keefe, for actually the Library and Archives Canada here, scanning maps of Normandy, but we scan all sorts of great content, including some stuff from Hong Kong. Before I get too much into the project, just want to talk about resources and collaborations. First, we had an excellent collaboration with the Hong Kong Baptist University with Dr. Kwong, who helped our team out extensively with all the unit data that powers our web map and our content. So really appreciate the collaboration we had with Dr. Kwong and our ability to work together. As well, we did quite a bit of work on war diaries of some Canadian units and some British units, including transcription by our volunteers. So actually went in and took the old war diaries, converted it into a Word document, and then transcribed and make sure the edits were done properly so they represent the original war diary. Some of the other stuff that we worked with was the official history of the Canadian Army by C.P. Stacey for some of the maps of how the Battle of Hong Kong happened, and then some of the content we grabbed from Library and Archives Canada. So that in Library and Archives, they have just some original maps of the Battle of Hong Kong and the defensive situations, which we use to create some of our content. So I'm just going to briefly go over what we've done for the project, and then I'll give a demonstration afterwards. So the first thing we have is a Battle of Hong Kong landing page. That's where the general public can come in and learn about the Battle of Hong Kong. Next, we have a Hong Kong defensive map, which just explores what Hong Kong would have looked like in 1941. Next, we have a Force C personnel database. So this covers everybody who was part of Force C. And this is created from the excellent database on the Hong Kong Commemorative Veterans Association's website. That's where we pull all the data from. As well, we created a story map of the battle to allow people to explore the battle in an interactive fashion. As well, we created a little infographic of hell ships and what that concept is for Canadians who are probably not very aware. because our history tends to be very European centric, focused on D-Day, the Italian campaign, etc. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Project 44 and the data as a whole and how it fits into our Project 44 framework. So if you were to go to our website, I'm sure you'll get the links afterwards from Mike. You come to project44.ca. You want to check out the content we created. All you would do is scroll down until you find the Battle of Hong Kong, click on it, and then you come to our Hong Kong landing page. So as I mentioned before, we worked with Dr. Brad St. Croix, who's an excellent historian, and he helped us write the content for this landing page. Probably nothing groundbreaking here for most people who are on this this chat tonight. This is meant to be a very broad overview of the Battle of Hong Kong from a Canadian perspective. Really, the audience is for those who don't know about the Battle of Hong Kong. So we want to bring it to a new audience to entice them to learn about the battle and to know that the war was not just being fought in Europe. Through our landing page, we provide 3 different web maps for people to explore and an infographic as well, which I talked about earlier. So one of our first web maps that we have is the defenses of Hong Kong. So this is embedded in our landing page. You can use it straight from here. It's interactive. You can zoom in. But to get the most out of it, I highly recommend you press full screen. This will give you a full screen web map to explore. So as I said, this is interactive web map. So what that means to me is something you can actually interact with and move around. So if you hold left mouse button, you can pan around. If you hold the right mouse button, you can actually pitch up and down the map. And then with the mouse scroll, you can zoom in and you can zoom out. We also have zoom buttons on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we have a legend that just explores all the content we have on the web map. You can just click that on or off to explore, so you can see pillboxes, the gin drinkers line, as well the minefields, sea minefields that were left to that were put out to stop amphibious invasion. Potential amphibious sites, as it was thought of from the British perspective, of where there might be an amphibious assault, as well as the anti-submarine defenses around the island of Hong Kong, the gun batteries, and then lastly, the base map. So this is a base map from the GSGS topographic system. So the general geographical section of the general staff, they produce these wonderful base maps, these topographic maps. And you can turn that on or off. So if you turn it off, then you get like a satellite image of Hong Kong as it is today. Next, if you go through the landing page, you can read more about the Battle of Hong Kong, and we come down to our story map. So once again, it does work from the landing page, but it's best if you go full screen. So this story map was written by, again, Dr. Brad St. Croix, and it was built by our team. And it generally provides an overview of the battle in an interactive way. So it starts off with an overview of the Pacific campaign. To advance the map and read through the text, all you need to do is take your mouse and put it over the text, and then scroll through the text, and it will slowly advance the map. So this is one of our more common products that we sort of create for users, for the public, for our audience. It's interactive, it tells a story, and allows users to interact with the web map and learn about it at the same time, while also showing different geographical perspectives. And it also mixes images, text, and video together. So you can see right here, we have a YouTube video, it's embedded. You can just play the video from the story map. Each section just advances the story map and changes to a different perspective. So here we can see sort of the opening stages of the Battle of Hong Kong and what it would have looked like. Here we can see what the invasion scheme would have been for the Japanese as they invaded Hong Kong. Advancing through, we can see the positions as they change as the battle advances, as well as where Company Sergeant Major Osborne would have earned his Victoria Cross. And just going through the map, we can start to see the retreat to the west and then on to the south for the battle. So really here, like the audience is, as I said before, is for general audience who want to have a better perspective on the Battle of Hong Kong. But I also view it as an opportunity to get a younger generation who wants something interactive to really understand how that happened and where things were. I find that if we can tie a battle to a place so people can really understand that there was an actual place where people were fighting, it helps just cement that battle in their mind. So that's our story map on the Battle of Hong Kong. If I go back to our landing page, we have more content, some great photos. Next, we have the Canadian POW camps, which just talks about the hell ship concept. So that's a concept that's probably not very well known by Canadians, especially even those who know a lot about Canadian military history. So I just wanted to talk about that, create this great infographic. It just talks about where the Canadian sort of journey would have started as a prisoner of war in Hong Kong and how they would have been transported on these hell ships to the Japanese mainland, and then covers the main prisoner of war camps. Next, we have the 4C personnel database. So this is just a database created from the excellent work that the Hong Kong Commemorative Veterans Association has already worked on. It is available on their website. But I want to bring it out in more of a geographical perspective to really kind of show how these different battalions, what was the makeup across Canada of where they came from, to really understand how the fall of Hong Kong would have affected Canadians. I think it really shows that off here. We can see the different colors. So if I go to the legend off to the right, you can actually click on the different units. So if I see the Royal Rifles of Canada, I can select the Royal Rifles, and you can see where all the soldiers' hometowns were from the Royal Rifles. We can see it's very Eastern Canada centric. And then the Winnipeg Grenadiers, we can see it's very prairie centric. It just helps us explore it. And, interesting fact that there was quite a few soldiers who weren't even, necessarily from Canada originally. As well, you can go and you can hover over the different dots just to get information on where these soldiers were. So to me, that helps understand where these soldiers come from. It allows you to potentially explore near your hometown. Maybe there were soldiers that served in Hong Kong near where you live. And it's fully interactive, so you can just scroll through the list of names and it will show up on the map. We also list additional resources. So going back to the Hong Kong Veterans Commemorative Association, it'll link back to the website, and as well with our excellent collaboration with the Hong Kong Baptist University. And lastly, what we're known for most is our actual web map. So this web map started in 2019. It focused on D-Day. It grew to all of Northwest Europe and then on to Italy. And we want to expand that to show other battles, including the Battle of Hong Kong. So if you want to access that web map, all you need to do is go to project44.ca. You come down to this button that says web map, and you'll be transported to our website. Now, word of warning, there is a lot of data, so it takes a bit of time to load the map, and it's going to start at the Battle of Normandy. So what I recommend you do is when you get to the website, you're going to want to come down to where the time slider is right here. There's a drop-down menu. Select the drop-down, and you're going to want to go to the Battle of Hong Kong. It'll take a minute to load, but it will bring you to the Battle of Hong Kong on the 8th of December, 1941, and you'll have the web map in front of you to explore. From here, there's quite a few things you can do, but one thing you can do is you can click on any of the units, and you can start reading the war diary. So if I click on the Royal Rifles of Canada, it'll bring up their war diary, and I can scroll through it and read it. If it's hard to read, I can just zoom in by pressing Control and mouse wheeling, so I can get a better view of the website, or I can just press these buttons up here, makes the text a little bit larger. And then you can just explore the map. So if I scroll through, I see the 9th of December. If I keep scrolling, it'll actually change the date and it will advance the timeline. We can see the battle sort of taking place in front of us, and we can read about it at the same time. I clicked on the 1st Middlesex Regiment here, and once again, you can read through the war diary. I go back to the Royal Rifles of Canada again, I can get their war diary. Off to the right, we have some settings, including base map. What I really like to do is go into the base map, turn on 3D maps, turn on the road map. And now I have a 3D map of the battle, so I can kind of see how everything is taking place. And then lastly, what you can also do is go to our settings here, and you can change some settings here, but some of the bigger ones, if you want to change what the icons look like, if you're more familiar with like NATO icons, you can do that. So now it just changes the icons, so you can see that this is a battalion level unit. And then there's some also company level units as we advance the timeline. Right, so here we go. We can see the company positions. All right, well, that is the conclusion of the work we've done with Project 44 and the data that we have on our web map.
Well, thank you, Nathan. That's just like Chi Man's project. That's absolutely an amazing way to display the data about the battle and about the people who participated in the battle. And I know that a lot of the people who are watching this evening know teachers, high school teachers, or even have children or grandchildren in high school. Now, these are both fantastic tools for teachers to use to educate about the Battle of Hong Kong, because as Nathan, as you said, most of the focus in Canadian schools about World War II focuses on the European theater, not surprisingly, because that's where by far the bulk of Canadians fought. But the Battle of Hong Kong is a very important story from a Canadian standpoint. And this is a terrific way to get students involved, to get teachers involved in learning about the Battle of Hong Kong. So are any of our audience out there tonight who are teachers or no teachers, please recommend it to them. So now I invite you to submit your questions. Remember to do that using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Just click on it or touch it and type in your question. We do have a question already from Keith. I guess this perhaps goes to you, Nathan. He says, is there any plan to cover the men when they came home to get background stories? For example, I believe my father, Herbert Fortune's Winnipeg Grenadiers mother, from the Winnipeg Grenadiers, I believe his mother started the first Hong Kong Association in Toronto. Any thoughts on that, Nathan?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. We haven't thought of that particularly, but it's something we'd always entertain for sure. It's always important for us to tell the Canadian side of the story. And, you know, if that's something that you want to talk to us about, for sure, please reach out. You know, I think we tend to forget that we always focus on sort of the battle, right? What happened at a specific battle, but there's also a piece that happened before that battle where there's recruiting or the training side, but then there's also that piece that what happens to a soldier when they come home, right? So there's like 3 different elements to that. So this is always very interesting for sure.
One of our members, Lori Atkinson Smith, has on an experimental basis begun collecting a little bit of information about what the returnees to Canada did after they were repatriated, and has begun to put that information into our online database, Nathan, that you referred to. So, if we can build that information up, and in order to do that, we really are dependent upon the people who are watching here this evening to get that information to us. We're more than happy to populate that information into the database, and then Nathan, hopefully that could be included in what you've got in Project 44.
If there was a database that had populated data of certain factors, I think we could definitely explore adding that. One thing I do want to say is that our landing page, it's not finished, right? Like there can always be additions. If there's additions, if there's people who say there's something that we'd really love to add, could we work together on that? I think there's always opportunity for that to add more things. So I don't think that'd be an issue. And there is an interesting aspect of what happens to a soldier after the war. I think there's lots of value in that. I can't remember if I told you this years ago, Mike, or not, but I'm also the son of a Japanese, not a POW, but an attorney. My father was captured by the Japanese as well as a civilian because he was in the Dutch East Indies. So I think of it from that perspective. What was it like for him afterwards? There's lots of different unique aspects to understanding what happens to a soldier after that.
Absolutely. All right, thank you, Nathan. Chi Man, a question for you along the lines of teaching this in school. Is the Battle of Hong Kong taught in Hong Kong schools? And if so, how is it being taught?
Mike, I'm sorry. Can I share the screen again, because I would like to show how it is being taught.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so thanks for the question. And the reason we have this project is that schools in Hong Kong want this to be taught. Yeah. So nowadays it is part of the Form 3. That means the boys and girls would be like 15 or 16 years old. So they will be taught about the Battle of Hong Kong in a single lesson. So here's the problem then. Time is short. A lesson is usually 35 to 40 minutes. So we have to create this map in order to let them know about the story and introduce them to more content so that they can explore things about the battle later on. So this is the opening screen of the map. So we have the map itself, we have the people's stories, we have the built heritage, etc., etc. So people can look at different stories and so on, and then learn about all these people's lives and before the Battle of Hong Kong and afterwards, what happened to them in the battle. And the map itself consists of, as I said, all these things. So why it was being used in a lesson? Because it can be basically played as a video to show different progress of the battle so that the teachers can actually finish teaching the progress itself in like less than 15 minutes, and then they can move on to talk about different aspects of the battle or the historical structures, maybe the people stories, etc., etc. And then, so it's a cost-saving measure. Let's put it this way. So that was the argument I used to get the funding. So that's why it was being taught. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I know from my own experience with my grandchildren that when I show them pictures of the trips that my wife and I take, they're interested. As soon as I come to a video, immediately their attention is captured. If anything is moving on the screen, it captures their attention. And that's why these two systems, I think, are so powerful for students. David wants to know, technical question, I guess. I'm watching this on my iPad and I'm not sure I can get to use all this program offers. Would my computer be better to use?
I'll take that. Yeah, this is always the problem that we have when we create systems like we do. Some computers or some systems won't always run it, and it's really unfortunate, but it will always be the best experience on your PC with a good internet connection, but we can't, my site anyways, can't always personally guarantee that it's going to work well, because there's just so much, there. It's a lot. It's unfortunate, but that's the truth.
Yeah, on our side, things are better, a bit better maybe, because we did a survey. 75% of our users tries to access the website from mobile devices, iPhones and iPads. So we can't afford losing those customers. So we spent almost an entire year trying to create a user interface and user experience that can be used on specifically on mobile devices. So it works very well on iPhones and iPads. So our map, but it's 2D. That's why, because since it was technically more simple, that's why it can be used. Yeah, because Nathan's side, you have a 3D map and so on, so it's very difficult to suit different devices. Yeah.
Okay. Don has an interesting question. Do the maps help to show where major mistakes were made by either side?
Can I say something first?
Sure.
I think it shows not just that, but also crucial decisions that made that helped to shape the outcome of the battle. I did publish an article about this, the insights or the views I have about the battle after finishing an entire project. It was published in Canadian Military History Journal, I think last year in December. Yeah, no, in December 2021. Yes, it did show, but we didn't flag it out. So that's the worst part of this kind of project, because it basically shows things. The interpretation part still has to be done in the textual basis. Yeah, it really visualizes things. It helps you to visualize and helps you understand. But the good thing is it's open for different interpretations, because it's the same visualization. People look at it and maybe they have different views. For me, I just give you an example. Now I have an idea that the Japanese artillery did a major role in shaping the outcome of the battle only after 22nd of December 1941, after they were redeployed from Kowloon to Hong Kong Island. Because before that, Japanese basically was stuck in the middle of the island and they got nowhere. So that's one thing I got from the project. So yeah, in short, yes.
Okay. So it's enabled, the project has enabled you to do that kind of analysis and come up with that kind of conclusion. Yeah. Nathan, any comment from your side, because you're covering not just the Battle of Hong Kong, but also other fronts in Canada's war.
Yeah, so I will say, like, maybe this is a bit of a cop. I'm not a historian, so I don't try to make conclusions. I try to build the website and add it full of data and make it useful so historians can go and make those conclusions. Okay. But I definitely think it will show mistakes. Our website for Battle of Hong Kong won't show you the level of detail that Dr. Kwong's website will. His goes into the very minutiae data, which I love his website. But if you were looking at Normandy at a higher level scale, you could definitely start seeing where major mistakes were. But that just shows the power of what GIS has, right? It's sort of an objective analysis, because you go in, you just take facts of where things were, and then you can start drawing conclusions afterwards. And I think that's what's really exciting, is the work that Dr. Kwong and our teams do. We preserve that data so there can be that higher level analysis, not just, some commander said, oh, this happened. Well, now we can go back and see if what he said was true, or, maybe there's a bit more nuance to it.
Okay. Stan has a different question. Was there ever a story on the children of the vets and how they fared? And I might comment that one of the things that we've tried to do in this series of presentations that the HKVCA is doing is to shed some light on what has happened to the families of vets, because there's clearly been an impact. Some families were devastated, maybe is not too strong a word to use, by the results of the treatment that the veteran had during his imprisonment or during the battle. And so we've done some stories on that. So I would encourage anybody who's interested to go back and look at our HKVCA website. All of the previous recordings of these events are still there, and I encourage you to watch them. Barbara just makes a comment. She said, the first picture you showed was my father as the soldiers came down the stairs. How much information will there be about individuals? And I guess we've sort of answered that question, but I thought it was interesting that Barbara actually saw her father right at the beginning of the presentation. Barbara goes on to say that her father died. She grew up in the US and got no Canadian news, and her mother got very little information. So, you know, I guess she's really looking to get as much information as she can from these databases. A comment from Fred and Sandra, both to Chi Man and to Nathan and their teams. They're saying this is absolutely excellent work. The presentation is inspiring and will be shared by so many. And thank you, Fred. And Fred is the son of a Hong Kong veteran. Somebody else wanted to know how many people are participating tonight. Oh, there were about 75 people signed on to watch the event live. And as I mentioned, we're recording the event, and we'll get probably at least that many people who will watch the recording afterwards. So I've come to the end of the questions. Are there any other questions from the audience? I'll give you a minute to ask before we bring this to a conclusion. Going once, going twice. Okay, well, I guess there are no more questions. So let me just conclude by mentioning to our audience that, first of all, thank you for joining in. You will be receiving an email from us within 24 hours. And there are a few things in that email that I'd like you to take note of. The first is that there will be a short anonymous survey. Only takes about a minute of your time. So please complete that survey, because that's going to help us understand how we can improve these events. And also, we're asking you for ideas on subjects and speakers for future events. So please don't hesitate to reply. There are also instructions on how to join our Facebook group. So you can look there and put in your own information, your own stories, and exchange experiences with others. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, there will be a link to both of the interactive systems that you've seen tonight, so you can try these out for yourselves and see how they work. So thank you to everyone, and thank you particularly to our speakers, to Nathan and to Chi Man for joining in today. We really appreciate both the time you've taken to present, but more especially the time and effort that you and your teams have taken to prepare these fantastic ways to visualize the Battle of Hong Kong. So the HKVCA's mission is to educate Canadians on the Battle of Hong Kong and on its effect on the survivors and their families. And I hope that you found tonight's event and previous virtual events that they've contributed to supporting that mission. And as I mentioned, please do watch the recordings of these events and recommend them to your family and friends. So with that, thank you very much, and have a good evening and a good day for you, Chi Man. Bye-bye.